Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So my wife just gave birth today, and after thanking the doctor, I pulled him aside and sheepishly asked, "How soon do you think we'll be able to make love?" He winked at me and said, "I'm off duty in 10 minutes. Meet me in the car park." So a man storms into his crowded local bar, brandishing a revolver and shouting, "Which one of you bastards has been screwing my wife?" From the back of the bar, a voice calls out, "You don't have enough bullets, mate." So I took my 8-year-old girl to the office with me on "Take your kid to work" day. As we were walking around the office, she started crying and getting very cranky. So I asked what was wrong with her. As my coworkers gathered around, she sobbed loudly, "Daddy, where are all the clowns that you said that you worked with?" So my wife sent me a heartwarming text that read, "If you're sleeping, send me your dreams. If you're laughing, send me your smile. If you're eating, send me a bite. If you're drinking, send me a sip. If you're crying, send me your tears. I love you." I replied, "I'm on the toilet. Please advise." So Mick Flaherty had drunk more than enough Guinness and stumbled out of bar into the Sunday afternoon sun. As his bleary eyes squinted to adjust to the light, an ambulance sped by, blue lights flashing and siren blaring. Without thinking, Mick took off running after it. He chased that ambulance for 100 yards, then 200, then 300, almost a quarter of a mile until, completely out of breath, he collapsed into the gutter. With his last ounce of strength, he yelled, "You can keep your damn ice cream." So women are refusing to sleep with men now that Trump got re-elected. Apparently, my wife predicted the election 2 years ago. So one evening, a wife leaned in close to her husband, gave him a playful smile, and purred, "Have you ever seen $20 all crumpled up?" Curious, he shook his head. "Nope." She slowly unbuttoned her blouse, reached into her lacy push-up bra, and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He chuckled, "Nice trick." Then she teased again, "Ever seen $50 all crumpled up?" His eyes widened. "No." With a wink, she slid off her skirt, reached into her lace panties, and pulled out a crumpled 50. Now, he was definitely intrigued and sweating a little in anticipation. He leaned forward, eager for what might come next. Then she leaned in close and whispered, "Ever seen $50,000 all crumpled up?" He practically jumped out of his seat. "No, but I'd love to." She paused, gave him a sweet but sorry look, and said, "Then go take a look at our Ford in the garage." So a guy walks into a bar and says to the bartender, "I couldn't help but notice the help wanted sign outside the bar. Our piano player unexpectedly died last week," says the bartender, "so we've been looking for a new one on short notice." "Well, the timing seems to have worked perfectly," says the guy. "I got fired from my job a week ago, and I don't like to brag, but I consider myself a pretty good piano player. I even wrote a few songs." The guy sits down at the piano and starts to play a song. "That's a very nice song you're playing," says the bartender. "Thanks," says the guy. "I call. It just threw up on my new shirt. It's the first song I ever wrote." Then he starts to play another song. "Of all the songs I've ever written, this is my favorite. I call. It holes in my underwear. I'm willing to hire you on one condition," says the bartender. "When you play your songs, Don't announce the titles. The guy agrees to the condition and is hired. A few days later, the guy is playing the piano at the bar. After finishing a song, he gets up to use the bathroom. When he comes back, everyone in the bar stares at him in shock. For a moment, there is complete silence. Finally, someone says, "Do you know your fly is open?" "Know it," comes the reply. "I wrote it." So a guy walks into a doctor's office and says, "I fart about once every minute. But the strange thing is, they never smell." He lets out a really loud fart and says, "See? It doesn't smell." "I think I know what the problem is," says the doctor. He goes to his closet and gets a long stick with a hook on the end. "Hold it," says the patient. "What are you gonna do with that thing?" "I'm going to open the window," says the doctor. "Also, here are some pills to help you clear your sinuses." So a Hawaii woodpecker and a California woodpecker were arguing about which place had the toughest trees. The Hawaiian woodpecker said Hawaii had a tree that no woodpecker could peck. The California woodpecker accepted his challenge and promptly pecked a hole in the tree with no problem. The Hawaiian woodpecker was in awe. The California woodpecker then challenged the Hawaiian woodpecker to peck a tree in California that was absolutely impeccable, a term woodpeckers like to use. The Hawaiian woodpecker expressed confidence he could do it, so accepted the challenge. After flying to California, the Hawaiian woodpecker successfully pecked the tree with no problem. So the two woodpeckers were now confused. How is it that the California woodpecker was able to peck the Hawaiian tree and the Hawaiian woodpecker was able to peck the California tree, but neither one was able to peck the tree in their own state? After much woodpecker pondering, they both came to the same conclusion. Your pecker is always harder when you're away from home. So a Scottish couple was walking across the meadows. The girl looked at the guy and shyly asked, "Would you like to hold my hand?" "Ah, well, yes," the boy said. "But how did you know?" She said, "By the gleam in your eye." They walked a little further, and the girl said, "Would you like to kiss me?" "Oh, my yes," replied the boy. "But how did you know?" She said, "By the gleam in your eye." As they got to the stream, they sat on a stump. The girl looked at the boy and asked, "Would you like to go all the way with me?" "Well, oh my gosh, yes. Yes. But how did you know? By the gleam in my eye?" "No," replied the girl, "by the tilt in your kilt." So a woman walked into the kitchen to find her husband stalking around with a fly swatter. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Hunting flies," he responded. "How many you got?" she asked. "3 males, 2 females," he replied. Intrigued, she asked, "How can you tell them apart?" He responded, 3 were on a beer can, 2 were on the phone." So a science teacher was giving a lesson on the effects of different substances on living organisms. For her demonstration, she brought out 4 clear containers and placed a live worm in each one. The first worm went into a glass of beer. The second worm went into wine. The third worm went into whiskey. And the fourth worm was placed in mineral water. The class watched curiously. The next day, the teacher brought the containers back and showed the students the results. The worm in the beer, dead. The worm in the wine, dead. The worm in the whiskey, dead. But the worm in the mineral water, alive and wiggling. The teacher turned to the class and asked, "So, children, what can we learn from this experiment?" Little Johnny raised his hand eagerly and said, "Easy. If you drink beer, wine, and whiskey, you won't get worms." So while shopping at the grocery store, two nuns happened to walk past the beer cooler. One of them paused and said, "Sister, wouldn't a nice cold beer or two taste wonderful on a hot summer evening?" The other nodded and replied, "It certainly would, but I'd feel awkward buying beer. I'm sure it'd cause a scene at the checkout." The first nun smiled confidently. "Don't worry, I can handle it." She picked up a six-pack and marched straight to the register, with the second nun trailing behind. When they reached the cashier, he blinked in surprise, clearly unsure what to say. Without missing a beat, the first nun leaned in and said, "We use it to wash our hair. It's sort of a shampoo." The cashier didn't flinch. He reached under the counter, tossed a pack of pretzel sticks into their bag, and said with a smirk, "Well, then the curlers are on the house." So, husband and his wife advertised for a live-in maid to cook and do the housework. They hired a lovely lass for the job. She worked out fine, was a good cook, was polite, and kept the house neat. One day, after about 6 months, she came in and said she would have to quit. "But why?" asked the disappointed wife. She hemmed and hawed and said she didn't want to say, but the wife was persistent, so finally she said, "Well, on my day off a couple of months ago, I met this good-looking fellow from over in the next county, and well, I'm pregnant." The wife said, "Look, we don't want to lose you. My husband and I don't have children, and we'll adopt your baby if you will stay." She talked to her husband and he agreed, and the maid said she would stay. The baby came, they adopted it, and all went well. After several months, though, the maid came in again and said that she would have to quit. The wife questioned her, found out that she was pregnant again, talked to her husband, and offered to adopt the baby if she would stay. She agreed, had the baby, they adopted it, and life went on as usual. In a few months, however, she again said she would have to leave. Same thing. She was pregnant. They made the same offer. She agreed, and they adopted the third baby. She worked for a week or two, but then said, "I am definitely leaving this time." "Don't tell me you're pregnant again," asked the lady of the house. "No," she said. "I just can't handle all these damn kids." So little Johnny farts in the classroom, and his teacher gets really upset and throws him out. He goes and sits outside the class and can't stop laughing. The principal walks by and sees him sitting outside laughing. He says, "Little Johnny, what are you doing sitting here laughing?" Little Johnny says, "I farted in class and the teacher threw me out." The principal says, "Well, then, why are you laughing?" Little Johnny says, "Because they are sitting in the classroom smelling my fart while they put me outside in this beautiful, clean air." So a new supermarket opened near my house. It has an automatic water mister to keep the produce fresh. Just before it goes on, you hear the sound of distant thunder and the smell of fresh rain. When you approach the milk cases, you hear cows mooing and experience the scent of fresh hay. When you approach the egg case, you hear hens cluck and cackle, and the air is filled with the pleasing aroma of bacon and eggs frying. The veggie department features the smell of fresh buttered corn. I don't buy toilet paper there anymore. So 3 writers, Alan, Ben, and Carl, were attending a writing convention. They booked a 3-bedroom suite on the 75th floor of a hotel. When they returned to the hotel after the convention, the receptionist told them, "I'm terribly sorry, but all the elevators are out of order. You'll have to take the stairs. Now, Alan was a writer of funny stories. Ben specialized in scary stories, and Carl wrote sad stories. To make the climb less boring, they came up with a plan. Alan would tell funny stories while they climbed from the 1st to the 25th floor. Ben would tell scary stories from the 26th to the 50th floor, and Carl would share his sad stories from the 51st to the 75th floor. They started up the stairs, and Alan kicked things off with his funniest stories. By the time they reached the 25th floor, Ben and Carl were laughing so hard they had tears in their eyes. Next, Ben took over and began telling his scariest stories. By the time they reached the 50th floor, Alan and Carl were clutching each other in fear, shaking like leaves. Finally, it was Carl's turn. He sighed and said, "I'll start with my saddest story of all." The other two leaned in, ready for it. "There once was a man named Carl," he began, "who left the hotel room key in the car. So I ran into a friend just after he had returned from his regular Saturday morning round of golf. When I asked him how his round had been, he said it was lousy. I only hit 2 good balls all day." "Well," I replied, "that's better than none." He countered with, "Not if it's how I did it." "Why?" I queried. "You see," he said, "it was when I was in a bunker and stepped on the rake." So on a flight, the passengers suddenly hear, "Here is your pilot. Today is my 10,000th flight. I would like to do something special. Would you like to experience a loop?" Then applaud. The excited passengers applaud. The pilot says, "Okay, fasten your seatbelts," and a few moments later he does a perfectly executed loop. Everyone is laughing and applauding. Would you like to experience a corkscrew roll? More applause, and the pilot does the maneuver to loud acclaim. "Okay, this was it. Enjoy the rest of your flight." At that moment, the toilet opens, and a wet and soiled man shuffles out and shouts, "Do you think that's funny?" So 3 children are sitting on the couch with their mother on a rainy Saturday afternoon. To break the boredom, the youngest daughter asks, "Mom, how did we get our names?" Their mother smiles and says, "Why, I'll tell you." She turns to her youngest and says, "When you were born, we took you outside, and a daisy floated through the air and landed right on your head. So we named you Daisy." Daisy beams, happy with her story. Then the mother turns to her middle child, her son. "And when you were born, we took you outside, and it started to snow. A snowflake landed gently on your head, so we named you Snowflake." Snowflake grins, delighted with his story. Finally, the oldest child turns to his mother and begins mumbling incoherently. The mother sighs and says, "Shut up, Cinderblock." So a man and a woman who had never met before, but who were both married, found themselves assigned to the same sleeping cabin on a transcontinental train. Though initially embarrassed and uneasy over sharing a cabin, they went to bed, he in the upper berth and she in the lower. At 1 a.m. they were both still wide awake, and they both knew it. He said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but would you be willing to reach into the closet under your bed to get me a second blanket? I'm awfully cold." "I have a better idea," she replied. "Just for tonight, let's pretend that we're married." "That's a great idea," he said, now totally aroused. "Good," she replied. "Get your own damn blanket." After a moment of silence, he farted and didn't care. So a teenage girl had been talking on the phone for about 30 minutes, and then she hung up. "Wow," said her father, "that was short. You usually talk for 2 hours. What happened?" "Wrong number," replied the girl. So there was an old man who lived by a forest. As he grew older and older, he started losing his hair, until one day, on his deathbed, he was completely bald. That day, he called his children to a meeting. He said, "Look at my hair. It used to be so magnificent, but it's completely gone now. My hair can't be saved. But look outside at the forest. It's such a lovely forest with so many trees. But sooner or later, they'll all be cut down, and this forest will look as bald as my hair. What I want you to do," the man continued, "is every time a tree is cut down or dies, plant a new one in my memory. Tell your descendants to do the same. It shall be our family's duty to keep this forest strong." So they did. Each time the forest lost a tree, the children replanted one, and so did their children and their children after them. And for centuries, the forest remained as lush and pretty as it once was, all because of one man and his reseeding airline.